Hey, leaders and learners, Leonard Geddes here, founder of the Learn Well projects, where my mission is to make learning more visible, more manageable, and more effective. So today we're going to talk about one of the most talked about skills in higher education, and that skill is time management. Unfortunately, I believe that much of the conversation regarding time management is flawed because the conversations miss out on one fundamental point that I'm going to cover here. But first, let me set it up by saying this. One of the questions that students have to discover and figure out in college is, how do I apportion my time? That question matters because we only get so much time, and if students are wrong on how they're apportioning their time, then they'll find themselves rushing, running out of time, and they'll have subpar work, mainly because they didn't properly apportion their time. Many students have been given bad advice about apportioning time. You've probably heard things like this: study 3 hours for every hour you're in class. That's something that many educators tell students, and I advise against that type of advice for one simple reason. When we give students a certain amount of time per class, then they believe that by checking that box, they have learned what they need to learn. I've spent many years going around college campuses, and I will see students who have satisfied those time slots, and I'll ask them questions that try to assess what they know after they've checked off those time boxes, and most of them can't articulate what they know. So in other words, they feel a sense of preparedness because they've checked off the time boxes, but they don't know anything that they need to know in order to do well on whatever assessment awaits them. That's well-meaning advice, but it's terrible advice for students. Rather than telling them how much they need to study per class, the key relationship students have to learn in academic work is the relationship between thinking and time apportionment, because the level of thinking that is involved in a particular task has a direct influence on how students need to think during that class, which is going to then in turn affect how long it takes to do the academic work. So in this video, I'm going to show you a simple but effective exercise that I've used with students and faculty and learning assistance folks to help students better apportion their time for academic work. So check it out. So this is my session on time management, and it's time management specifically for academic work. Now, I have a YouTube playlist on the difference between mental work and manual work, so I encourage you to check that out because it'll inform you on why I think we have some of these fundamental flaws in how we understand time management when it comes to academic work. So the core issue with time management for students stems from a miscalculation. Students tend to overestimate what they can do in any given amount of time because they don't accurately gauge how much time quality thinking actually takes. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, that if you are wanting to really understand this, then you have to understand my Think Well, Learn Well diagram, where I talk about it from a metacognitive standpoint. So students have to make these relationships between the thinking skill they're using and the actual time it takes and the value of that particular thinking skill. So there's this interaction between the thinking skills students are using, the time it takes to use that skill, and the value of that skill. These relationships are at the core of what we're going to cover next. So this is a productive learner metacognitive based time tracker card that I use professionally with me, that I've used to really hone my time management skills, but I've also used it in trainings with Learning Center folks, first year experience, faculty and staff and students, and also just students in general who want to better apportion their time for academic work. And here's a quick rundown of how it works. Let's say you're in a class, let's say it's a physics course, and your task is to explain the principles of special relativity and their relationships to the assumptions of Galilean relativity as they relate to motion. Now, students will get this and they will just start studying it. So this time tracker note card can be used to help students better apportion their time. So the way students use this is they have to estimate how much time it will take to engage in a certain academic task, and then they have to track it to see how much actual time it takes so that they can understand the difference between how much time they estimate and how much time it actually takes. And then there's a spot to take notes on it and then to kind of summarize the overall experience. So let's walk through this really quickly. So in that particular task that we just covered, students have to first remember the principles of special relativity. And let's say the student estimates that it's going to take 35 minutes, but then it actually takes 25 minutes. So they actually overestimated by about 10 minutes. So they gain time in their notes is that, oh, this is just light work. Well, then the next one says they have to explain the principles of special relativity. Well, they estimate that it's going to take 45 minutes, but it actually takes 75 minutes. So that's an extra 35 minutes it takes to engage in that higher quality of thinking. And they understand that in their notes had to work a little harder to understand rather than just remember. And then it says they must remember the assumptions of Galilean relativity. And let's say that they were pretty accurate on that one. Then as they continue on, they have to explain the assumptions of Galilean relativity. And they estimate 60 minutes, but it actually takes 75 minutes. So that's another 15 minutes added on top of that. And they're getting closer. It's not as big of a gap as when they had to explain special relativity up here, but there's still a gap there that they're trying to become more accurate in their estimations. And then they have to compare and contrast the relationships among the two theories. They estimate 75 minutes, and whoa, it actually takes 120 minutes. And that's because they had to draw out these connections, and doing that took a higher quality of thinking or more processing power. So that took an extra 45 minutes. So they need to understand that. Then they have to explain how each of the theories expressed how we observe motion. So they have to connect it back to that. And they now had this experience where they compare and contrast, and they estimate that this new explaining how each theory expresses how we observe motion, they estimate 90 minutes, but they actually do it a little faster. It takes 75 minutes because the accumulation of the other thinking that they've done. And as you can see, they've saved 15 minutes because the process made it easier. As you can see these totals here, they estimated it would take, say, about 6 hours. It actually took about 7 hours of work, and it took about 70 more minutes. This explains why students tend to run out of time when they study, and it's because of that miscalculation that they're doing with how long it actually takes to do quality thinking. So as I like to say with students, they overestimate how much they can do in a given span of time, largely because they're underestimating the quality of thinking it takes. And that's because they haven't had any experience with this. So this is one of those fundamental skills that I think students need to have in academic work, but unfortunately they're not taught it. So they get a lot of other advice like study X amount of hours for every hour you're in class, or change this tactic or that tactic, which really aren't getting to the core of the problem. And as you can see at the end, the most valuable part is that the students need to come away with some better understanding of their time apportionment problems. And here the student says comparing and contrasting theories took longer than I had planned. And so now the student can plan more apportionately moving forward. So hopefully that gives you some insight into how I do metacognitive based time management to really help students at the source of their time management challenges. All right, so hopefully you've watched that video, you've learned some things that you can use to help students better apportion their time. If you are a student, hopefully it helped you better apportion your time. And if you're a parent, man, you've got some really good advice to give your kids a leg up on time apportionment in higher education. I'll end by saying this. Time management is essential to academic work as it is to any other field. This particular practice is a keystone practice, meaning that if students do this early on, then it will pay benefits for them throughout their academic careers and beyond into their professional lives as well. So it's one of those skills that pays dividends and carries benefits on throughout students' academic and their personal and work lives. All right, so I hope that video was useful to you and helped you learn some key things about academic work and time management. So if you're a student, you've really got some golden material here to use that's going to help you get your work done better and more effectively and help you score better. If you're a learning assistance professional, great way for you to train your folks in your center or to help you pass along to students. And if you're a parent, you've just got some really, really useful information to separate your students and give them an edge when they go on to college or in the working world as well. So I'll just end by saying this. This isn't a practice that you can do all the time. It's something that you embed in students' academic experience early, and then it takes on a life of its own. It's called a keystone practice because once we help students develop this particular time management skill, their mind and how they understand time apportionment changes, and they benefit from it throughout their academic career. So I've seen many institutions implement this in a first year focused course, so where they empower their students with this particular time management competency, and they watch them begin to better apportion their time and study much more effectively and much more impactfully. Thanks. And as always, if students think well, they will learn well and perform well.